Hi everyone, it's Matt from Platypus Digital here. Hope you're well and enjoying this lovely as we webinar this lovely Monday afternoon. I work at Platypus Digital, and this is the latest in our Digital Marketing for Charities webinar series, where we find out about different aspects of digital marketing. We've talked about smashing email marketing and which charities are doing that really well. We've talked about what charities are smashing social media too. And this time we're finding out exactly how British Heart Foundation managed to raise over £2 million just by changing a form on their website. Now, forms are one of those just sort of boring necessities of life. We all have to fill them in at some point or another, and online they tend to be the focus of most types of conversion that you can get, we think. So donations involve you filling out a form. People inquiring about running the marathon for your charity involves filling out a form. It all comes down to forms a lot of the time. It's not quite as exciting as social media or as immediate or anything like that, but it's one of the most important areas of digital, we think. So, and if you wanted to raise, do some serious fundraising online, then if you want to raise 2 million, then you can do a world-beating social media campaign like No Makeup Selfie or Ice Bucket Challenge or something like that. You can get hundreds and hundreds of people to run the London Marathon for you, or in this case, you can just edit a simple form on your website. So we're going to hear from Steve at British Heart Foundation, who's going to tell us how they managed to do just that. British Heart Foundation obviously doing some really good things on email marketing, on social media, and this is just something I think is absolutely brilliant. Just taking one form on your website, doing a few edits and a little bit of testing, and the net result being an extra 2 million in the battle to prevent heart disease. So, so I'm joined by Steve Guy from British Heart Foundation. Steve, over to you. Do you want to just introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your role, maybe a bit of the background of this form, things like that, and then just tell us how you did it.
Yeah, hi Matt. I'm Steve. I'm a digital development coordinator at British Heart Foundation. So what I do is sort of look at all the sort of small to medium and web projects that come up and sort of manage those and coordinate those. And what's the main bit of work we've been doing over the last couple of years is a project to completely rebuild the sort of back end infrastructure to the website. So to replace content management, replace all the integration with the back end systems and so on. So we spent about 2 years doing that. We went live with a new website last December. And mostly we didn't really change the content, we didn't change the information architecture at all. We just replaced like with like and replaced all the back end stuff. But there were a few obvious quick wins that we thought we could massively improve on processes and forms we had on the site as they were. And one of our biggest earners is our furniture and electrical donation form. We've got about 200 furniture and electrical shops, and what they'll do, you can either submit a form online or you can phone the shops up, and they'll send a van around to collect your sofa or your television or whatever. And we make a lot of money on those. I can't remember exactly how much it is in total, but we sort of average about £75 per order that comes in. So with 200 shops, I think we get about 20,000 orders a month. Obviously, it doesn't take much for an incremental increase for that to benefit us quite a lot in terms of the total money we get from that process. So I'm just going to flip over to the presentation I did at the moment, to you guys recently. Sorry, a second. Okay, so can you see that okay, Matt?
Yeah, looking good.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Let me see if the slideshow mode works. If it doesn't, I'll just come out of it. If you can just tell me. Is that okay?
That's slightly bigger than it was before, but yeah, I think we can read it. Just take it.
Anyway, so we relaunched the website in December last year. As a result of a 2-year project, big piece of work. And as I say, we looked at the form that people use to donate their old furniture. So this is the form that we had before we relaunched it. I don't know how easy it is to see all that, but you can probably see that there are dozens and dozens of fields. There's loads of text. It's really fiddly, really complicated. And the net result of that was that we had a conversion rate of only about 25% of people that start completing the form make it through to the end. 75% of people give up. And on mobile, that was even worse. That was about 83% gave up. It was really difficult to use. Obviously, I'm actually surprised that it was as high as 17% made it through all the way through to the end. But this form, even in this terrible state, because the program that we do to pick up its furniture did manage to raise us a lot of money. But we took a lot of that. As often with internal forms, there's a payoff that people accept a certain payoff with fewer people submitting if they can capture more information to build a relationship and so on. But we found a lot of that information, extra information that we were asking for, wasn't of any use anyway. So we cut it down. Again, you probably can't see that very well, but you can see there's a lot less text. There's far fewer fields. There's a lot less information we're asking, and it's all on one page. It uses responsive design so that it's mobile friendly and easy to complete on a phone. And immediately our conversion rate straight away jumped up from 25% to 50%. And on mobile, weirdly, there's sort of a 1% difference on mobile on tablets and on desktop, but everyone's making it through about 50% of the time, which bearing in mind these people that are going to the page are already fairly interested in the process. 50% is still a pretty good rate, we thought. So the net result of that, and this is actually wrong, this figure that I'm going to quote here is 2 million a year, because we've recently found that was based on the idea that these were worth £50 each to the British Heart Foundation. But we've done some more digging around and done some more calculations recently. It turns out they're about £75 each. So it's closer to an extra 3 million a year just for tidying up a form that would have cost, even if we did it as a standalone project, not part of the big project, it would have cost a few tens of thousands of pounds of investment and a bit of user testing to essentially make about £2 to £3 million a year extra. We also did a bit of work. This was a lot less conclusive, but we obviously, like any charity, we take cash donations. And we tidied that up slightly. That was a bit of a mess before. We used to have to register to make a donation. There were lots more fields and pages, and we cut that down by a similar amount. And we haven't seen quite such a drastic increase in use. And I think part of that is because people that are making a cash donation are probably more committed to the charity. Whereas people that are making a furniture donation are doing it largely out of convenience. The service is what they're interested in. But we still managed to increase the conversion rate there from 11 to 18%, and the net. I don't have any figures with me at the moment, I'm afraid, but the net value of all the donations through has increased year on year since the site relaunched. So that's pretty much it for the presentation. But just to say that we've got, this is a start point. We're not really finished where we are at the moment. What we want to do is start using a lot of multivariate testing tools, start doing sort of specific tests of totally different form designs, and really sort of go as far as we can from the forms we've got at the moment, and just use analytics to build on these sort of lessons that we're learning, which is ask less information. And sort of build on that over the next year, really.
Cool, so amazing stuff. So like with the donation form that you talked about there, getting from the 11% to the 17%, can you take us through a bit more about the sorts of things that you tested? I mean, because that's a really big increase. I mean, it's almost 50%, if not a bit more than 50%, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's, that on its own with a long-term impact as well, because you make that change once, and hopefully that's going to be sustainable over many months.
Yeah, I mean, we think there's a lot more to go on it, but I think one of the big problems we used to have was that we asked there were weird user journeys that it would require registration, or you could register as a guest, but if you'd already registered to the site with an email address and then tried to make a donation with that email address as a guest, you'd get stuck in some terrible loop of it keeping asking you to sign in or saying you'd use the password. So that was one thing that we cut out. I mean, that was an obvious one. Responsive design has definitely helped on, because it's meant that our mobile conversion rate and our desktop conversion rates are relatively similar for most of our forms. Whereas it used to be that the mobile conversion rate was appalling. It might, for furniture and electrical, it might have been that people were checking it out on their phone and then going later to desktop to submit the form, but we don't know. But yeah, the changing to responsive design has hugely helped. We're now much more consistent. We ask for the same information at the start of each form, and if you've already done it, you can sign in and it pre-fills all those details again. So that's tidied things up again. You can register as a guest easily enough. So it's nothing groundbreaking. It is just sort of taking things out, and I don't know. It's almost like if you're asking for information that isn't mandatory, then why are you asking it? I think is a good lesson to learn that you shouldn't have an asterisk against fields that are mandatory. You should almost just only have mandatory fields. Anything else is just superfluous, and it's always going to get in the way of people completing the process. But I must say I'm quite purist on this. That there is the other approach that it's actually worth accepting a smaller response rate if you get more information about the people going through the process, and therefore you can build a relationship with them. But I think if people are dropping out early, then you never get to build that relationship. So I think there's a real opportunity to be ahead, and the direction we want to go down now is really to see how little information we can capture when doing a donation. So really, boil it down to the absolute minimum. And then if once we've established that bond with someone making a donation, they've logged onto our site. We know who they are. We can start getting more information from them, and hopefully, convert that one-off donation to a regular monthly donation, or get them to campaign for us, or get them to sign up for our events. So it's really sort of using that first contact with them as a simple way to establish a conversation, get as little information as we can possibly manage to complete the transaction, and then take it from there.
It's a really interesting point about the mandatory fields thing. It's still probably the case on, I'd say, 90% of forms, and not just charity forms, but just any forms you see online, that you see the little red asterisks next to the essential ones, and then the ones that aren't essential, i.e. optional, are left blank, and there's no kind of field, anything on there at all. But it's a weird sort of setup. You're like, why, as you say, why is the form field on there if it's not something that you actually need to complete the transaction? I always wonder, why do organizations not just go back to that person to get that information later when they've built the relationship up that you're talking about?
Well, also, if I don't know, a lot of the time people do it to try to get more information about their campaigns, and about what's been an effective, where did you hear about us, as an example. But as soon as you're only getting a small percentage of people completing that, as soon as it's optional data that people have self-selected to give you, then it's not really useful anyway. It's not going to help you improve your campaigns if you've got 5% of people have completed that field. So I'm pretty much I'd be quite extremist on this and just say ask for name and credit card number and leave it there.
Yeah, just the absolute bare minimum. So when you're talking about the project itself, let's go back to the start where you had this huge form, billions of fields to complete. You had all these essays that you had to put in there. Internally, tell us what you can, obviously, but internally, was there a feeling, well, this is kind of the way we've always had this form, or this is the information
absolutely,
in a kind of long-term sort of way? So, how process-wise, how did you manage that?
Yeah, I think that's the case with a lot of charities, especially big charities. It's not going to be a secret to anyone who's ever worked at one that they can be quite slow-moving, and especially as sort of digital processes have evolved based on the old paper processes, and no one's ever, they've always been gradually improved over the years, going back to when they would have just been done by a phone call or via a letter or whatever. So it's very difficult for a big charity with a lot of people and a lot of processes to actually go back to square one and design the process from scratch. We didn't even get the opportunity to do that with this form, but I think because it's made such a difference, and because it has paid for itself so well, I think it gives us a lot of leverage internally to actually say, we should be looking at these processes as digital processes first and building the whole process around that. Where I think that the old web form that we had just basically been built on over the years, and someone would come along and say, well, can we ask for this bit of information? No one ever comes to you and asks for you to stop doing something on a website. That's a fairly constant thing with digital work, that you're always being asked to add more and more stuff, and quite often adding more and more stuff is not neutral. It does actually harm the stuff that's already there. So I don't know, we should almost have a sort of one in, one out policy with adding new bits of functionality to forms and to a lot of our sort of web features. That if you're always just adding something,
that kind of one thing I think would be quite a useful process.
Yeah, you can have this new piece of functionality on the agreement that you kill one of your old bits of functionality and we keep it going.
Yeah. It'd be interesting if people are watching this thinking, I kind of know that feeling where there's people in the rest of the charity who are asking us to add all this extra information to the website, who want to put more stuff out in social media, more emails out, all of that kind of thing. And as you say, if you put more stuff out there, then it can harm the stuff that's already there. I'm interested to know, how did you decide what information was going to get chucked off the form? Was it just as simple as going, well, we don't need that?
Yeah, I mean, we just sat around and crossed things off. It was sort of trying to get it down to the bare minimum that we could get away with, and sort of the old internal back-end processes could still function with. Because a lot of it with the furniture and electrical particularly was about the reporting. They're basically linked to the stores, and the stores are effectively run as retail as any other sort of business would run a retail operation. So they're very big on reporting and seeing what stores take in what stuff. So we had to balance the end user need with, one of the end user as in the donor, with the needs of the end users who were the shop managers and the area managers who were always needing a certain amount of management information from it. It was just cutting out what we could possibly get away with, I think. Quite often, other times we've done it. This was a bit too high profile to just go off and do it. But we've done it with other forms that have been less high profile, and just cut out the question. And then 6 months later, no one's even noticed that you've removed it. Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily the best advising people to go off and do this, but we generally found we found we could remove things, and those things had just been sitting there as a bit of legacy functionality that no one really cared about, and no one ever thought to take it off. And we found that often we could slim our forms back without worrying too much about the internal impact, because there was no internal impact any longer. So.
That's probably a good example of the kind of old adage that it's easier to apologize than it is to ask permission for something. Like if you just remove some forms, it's probably pretty unlikely that the people responsible for those forms are checking them every day to make sure it feels as though there's.
Yeah.
Just hack at it, like. You'll
find that your response rates or your completion rates are up anyway. By doing that. So by the time that if anyone even notices, then you've got the metrics to say, well, it improved the particular the conversion rate of that particular task.
So what about other forms on the British Heart Foundation website? Is this kind of an approach that you've done to, say, inquiry forms for people looking to fundraise or volunteer in other capacities? I mean, obviously that's really high value form. What about any others?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a big part of our work over next year is really applying the lessons from that, and also being able to use various A/B testing tools. We've started using Maximizer in the last few months, and that we've got some interesting results from that. And just taking the view that with every single new form we build, that we're gonna cut it down to the bare minimum, and we're then going to test it as soon as it goes live. And just letting that inform everything we do, and sort of, I think that the big hurdle for us initially is breaking things down so that they're modular enough that you can actually cut and shut different bits and really slim them down. At the moment, with if you've got one form that's got 20-30 fields in, it's very difficult to test that against an alternative. Without totally changing the process. So it's a bit hard to explain, but at the moment, because all of our functionality is quite sort of big and complex, changing little bits of it is harder than it should be. It's trying to sort of break all our forms down into a format where we can cut them up and try them in different combinations and permutations and so on. It's really going to be one of the biggest parts of our work over next year is applying that model to all the other forms we have.
And is the approach to that then that, as a really high profile charity, you get, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of visitors every month. And the most effective way to reach the people who are likely to, contribute to the charity in some way, whether by asking for a furniture donation or making cash donations or volunteer inquiries or whatever, is to target them on the website. And that not necessarily as an organization, but for your work, it's really important that you try and convert those people before you try and recruit more people, say through social media campaigns or acquisition or anything like that. Is it a real sort of organizational approach that we've got to target the people on the website because they're the ones who know and are interested?
I don't know. It varies from different. I'm probably not the best person to ask this, to be honest. I think our social media guys would probably know, be able to give you a much better answer to that. But I think a lot of it depends on the audience. We've got a lot of our audience is healthcare professionals, so they've got certain needs. There's obviously the audience for the content of the site, the information on the site is largely people who are worried or affected by heart disease. But then we've got things like the furniture and electrical donations. That the audience for that are largely people that don't know anything about the charity, or at least the first time they do it, don't know anything about the charity. So I think the opportunity there is to build on that, is to get them interested in other work that we do and sort of turn them into wider donors as opposed to just furniture donors. But yeah, sorry, I probably can't really answer it better than that. I think there's different tactics for different segments of the audience. Depending on the relationship with us. I know with events, with signing up for events, that has always taken the view that is building a relationship. That getting new people to sign up is really important, but maintaining the relationship with people that have already done your events in the past is just as important as attracting new people, I think. Because each year someone's likely to raise more money and becomes a more valuable asset to the charity, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I think it varies.
Cool. Okay. So if you were talking to, and as you are talking to people who work at charities in the digital teams who are kind of responsible for their forums, is there a sort of top 3 or even top 5 tips that you can give to get better conversion rates on them? And this is across the board. Not everyone's going to be doing furniture donation forms.
I think ask for as little as possible. Only ask for the essentials. Definitely on mobile forms, we've sort of been a bit hit and miss in this, but on mobile forms, if you declare the input type in the form, so when you type in an email address on a form that's well designed on your phone, you'll get the keyboard with the @ sign, or you get the number keyboard for inputting your phone number and so on. So always manage to set your input types correctly on mobile forms is a really important thing. I think. Yeah, I just think, if you've got to have large amounts of text explaining why you're asking things or explaining how to do it, then you've lost the battle already anyway. I think it's sort of making the route through it as clear as possible. Yeah, I think they would be the main ones.
Cool. And the only other question I actually had, thinking back now, is how are you getting the same conversion rate on mobile as you are on desktop? I mean, that to me seems like an absolutely achievement, because like forums on mobile are notoriously big.
Yeah, I don't know, and I've gone back and checked it again recently, and it's still roughly the same. They sort of vary around about 50%, 1 or 2% in either way. But I don't know. I think probably the developers and designers did a very good job of making the responsive format actually work almost as well on be almost as easy to use on a phone as on a PC. So no, I think I don't know. Other than we were really surprised and thought there was something up with it, and then checked it again a few months later, and it was still pretty much the same level. But I think the simpler the form is, the more likely it is to converge on the same response rate on mobile or desktop. Because I don't know. I think initially, especially for the first time someone makes a donation, or first time someone does something on a site, they're never doing it because of the user experience. The user experience is only ever going to stop someone doing it and make them give up halfway through a process. You don't give to a charity because their web forms are so excellent for the first time, but you might go back and do that thing. You're more likely to go back and do that thing again if the experience was seamless. Sorry, I've gone off at a tangent now. I can't remember what your question was to start with anyway. But yeah, I think no one ever made a donation because the UX was brilliant on a web form. but lots of people didn't make a donation because it was bad, I think. But yeah, there is a real lot to gain about getting that sort of repeat transaction, I think, if you make it as seamless as possible.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I think it was really a question about the mobile conversion rates, really, in particular, because
I suppose it is fairly straightforward to do. I mean, I suppose the one thing that's easier on the phone is it's got to find my location, so you don't have to put in a postcode. So I don't know, that might be one thing that makes it more likely that people will complete it. But it shouldn't really. I'm surprised.
Pleasantly surprised, I would imagine. Yeah, really.
Especially, you know, as of you know, like every other organisation, our traffic is now more than 50% mobile. So you know, any sort of drop in the response or the conversion rates on mobile is a significant hit now. So yeah, it's a pleasant surprise.
Cool. Well, I think that's more or less it. So I think I don't see any tweeted questions or anything at the minute, but if there is anything, I'm sure you'll be happy to answer online. So I mean, just from us, I would say it's a really interesting experience to find out how you can actually raise more money just by simplifying your online forms. I mean, for us, the website's the kind of absolute heart of all of your digital activity. It's where people go to make donations. It's where people make inquiries on forms. It's where people find out your phone number, get the advice they need. It's all happening on your website. So I think the main pieces of advice that Steve gave there are, you know, the best ones. Make sure the fields are mobile ready and that they trigger the right keyboards. Make sure they're as simple as possible. But you know, the key thing is only ask for the information that you really need. And yeah, people don't give because of the great UX of a form. It's the cause behind it and the messaging that they're seeing on every other part of the website. So test and experiment to make sure that what you're doing is optimized as possible, and maybe you can be raising another 2 to 3 million from a form as well. So yes, Steve, thanks so much for your time. Really interesting. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to tweet them, and we'll get them across. But yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Great. Thanks, Matt. See you.
Take care.